When two lovers meet in Naples, so the legends tell. Songbirds sing, winter turns to spring. Every winding street in Mayfair falls beneath her spell. I know such enchantment can be, 'cause it happened one evening to me. That certain night, the night we met, there was magic abroad in the air. There were angels dining at the Ritz, and a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. Nightingale sang. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm perfectly willing to swear. But when you turn and smile at me, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. The moon that lingered over London town, poor puzzled moon, he wore a frown. Oh, how he was so in love, the whole dark world seemed upside down. The streets of town were paved with stars. It was such a romantic affair. And as we kissed and said good night, a nightingale sang. A nightingale sang. In Berkeley
Hello and welcome to today's live stream Choral Question Time with me, Barnaby Smith. This stream forms part of our Live from Home series, and as ever I'm here to answer your questions about choral music, and my other features on today's show include playing you unreleased VOCES8 material, offering you some choral music CD recommendations, running a little competition giveaway for a very special prize, giving you an exercise that you can do at home to hopefully keep your voice in good shape whilst you're unable to go out and sing in your choir. And I'm also thrilled today to be featuring some guests on the show. Aside from my usual studio guests, I'm also pleased to be welcoming Andrea, Eleonore and Katie for an Upper Voices Summit. And I caught up with a former member of the group as well, but a little bit more about that later on. These shows do work best when they are interactive, so the onus is on you to get on the comments thread and send your thoughts, ask your questions and give your feedback. And I'll be looking at those throughout the show. I've also got a couple of wingmen, other members of the group, who are going to be working on those as well. I should also say that I'm here to train and develop my skills so that we're able to adapt to whatever the post-COVID world might look like for us. So we do need your feedback, so please get in touch and let us know what you think. If you like what we're doing, then if you're watching on Facebook, there's a new feature called Stars, so you can send us stars, and YouTube viewers can now also engage by sending us super chats, so go and check that out. First things first, let's take some quick fire questions from folks who've submitted in advance. So first of all, from Martin Bonzi. Very nice to hear from you, Martin. Hope you're well down under. Martin says, did you manage to get all the recording you need for the 4th chapter of After Silence done before the lockdown, or are you rejigging the content you had planned? Well, Martin, luckily we had got it all done. Generally speaking, when we make a CD, there's a pretty decent lead time from finishing the actual recording sessions to releasing the CD. If you think it's got to be edited, mixed, then it has to be pressed and all the artwork and the packaging has to be done. Then it has to go off in good time to the PR company so it can be sent out for review and all that sort of stuff before it hits the shop. So I think unusually with After Silence, we actually released some repertoire before we'd finished recording the whole project. So the first chapter came out in November, that was After Silence Remembrance, but we actually finished the recording process in January, and it was finally finished and mastered, I think, in April, and now it's been pressed and is hopefully making its way through all those final processes. But very good question, good forethought there. Nancy says, hi Barney, how does one deal with a section member who sings too loud and dominates the section? Really hoping to see you in the summer. We're really hoping we can see you too, Nancy. This is a difficult one. It's something that happens rarely in VOCES8. I'm very lucky with my section mate is Katie, and she's very sensitive to these sorts of things. But I've noticed it more when working with chamber choirs and of course with amateur chamber choirs as well. I always think self-analysis in these sorts of scenarios is the best thing that you can probably go for. So trying to record yourself, perhaps a choir's performance or a rehearsal, and just taking the opportunity to all sit down together and listen to that back. Even better can actually be filming, because those of us who like to lead, which I myself do quite regularly, we lead physically as well as vocally, and so it's very good for us to see as well as to be able to hear what we're doing. And I think that element of self-analysis is crucial if you're going to keep those sorts of things under control. Kizzy asks, are all your arrangements done for you, or do you ever just jam and see what works out? I would say mostly done for us. I just played a little bit of A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square, which was an arrangement by our arranger in residence, Jim Clements, who's been writing for us for the whole time that the group's been in existence. I think we have over 100 arrangements from Jim now, and we work with a number of arrangers, one of whom is Naomi Krellin, who I'm speaking to later in the week if you've looked at the Live From Home schedule. But we probably have 5 or 6 arrangers who regularly write for the group and feature in our programmes. That's not to say that we don't just improvise and get together and do a bit of singing and see what happens, and that does happen much more so in the education environment. Actually, when we're working with students and that sort of thing, we spend a lot of time in the improvisational world then. One more then for this opening set of quickfire questions, and that's from Andrea Eklund, who says, when choral singers tend to sing with quite a high larynx position and you're doing classical music, do you have any tips on how to make them find a more classical sound with a lowered larynx? It's a very insightful question, Andrea, something we suffer from in VOCES8, singing with a high larynx. For those people who are a little unsure what the difference is, if I was to speak to you with a high larynx, it might sound up there with everything quite high in the throat, and that if I drop the larynx down, it begins to sound a lot lower and deeper and more round. And when we sing, of course, that has a very big impact. When we're trying to make quite a clean sound, or when we're belting, perhaps in pop repertoire, the larynx can get quite high in the throat. I think that if you're going for that sort of sound, of course, you want it to be there. So then you need to be very careful afterwards that you bring it back down. And you can do that with lots of different exercises. One that we do with the physicians who we work with our laryngeal health is to just place the tongue against the teeth and point it out, and then bring your hand down and just sweep your larynx back into position. So like this. Doing that sort of thing a few times can help the larynx to come back down if it's got stuck a little bit high. Another great thing I find for high larynx is swallowing a lot. And the other one, which I do when I get a high larynx, is thinking about the lecture that Ewan gave us on Alexander technique a few days ago. I put myself into that lying Alexander position, and just let my whole body relax, and hopefully my larynx will come down. If you're struggling to get your choir to sing with a low larynx, then this whole thing of yawning before you sing, that puts the larynx in a really low position. So exercises that are based around the preparation of the voice before sound is even made I find tend to be very good things to use. The other thing we use in VOCES8, which is a very good exercise, is we take a folk song. We normally use My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, and we get people to mimic characters singing it. So a really good character to mimic if you want people to sing with a low larynx, even though you don't tell them to sing with a low larynx, just tell them to impersonate a grand opera singer and they'll naturally go, my boy, and that's a very low larynx position. So those are the types of things that we will do, but it's something we keep a close eye on. And I'd be very happy to talk to you a little bit more about that off air if you'd like that. So please do get in touch. So thanks to all of you who've submitted your questions in advance. If you'd like to ask me a question whilst the session is running, then please do get in the comments box and we'll be following along with those. Moving on then, for my first feature of the day, of course, one of the downsides of being isolated is that I miss my colleagues, and I'm sure you miss their lovely faces too, and who knows, perhaps even their singing and witty banter. So I thought it would be nice to catch up with a few of them, so I arranged to chat with Andrea, Eleonore and Katie, thus forming an Upper Voice Summit. I wouldn't expect anything world-changing if I was you, but here's how we got on. Here we are for our Upper Voice Summit. Lovely to see you, ladies. I'll be the honorary lady as the council tenor. What are we doing to stay sane? Let's start there. Who's doing what?
I don't know whether I am staying sane, actually. But filling days with cooking and cleaning and just taking time over everything, just taking extra time over all the little things.
Nice, isn't it, taking time? It's the one thing probably we don't have when we're working is time, like actual time to do things at home. Yeah, okay, I can't say that I've been cleaning that much, but I have been cooking more than I normally do, so there you go.
I've been amazed at how much I've been managing to sleep. I think that's been taking up a good amount of my time, which is great.
What do you reckon your average sleep time is during work time? So when we're on tour, let's say we're in America, what's your average time actually asleep, do you think?
Maybe 6 hours.
7 hours.
In a bed, probably 6 hours, and then on a plane, maybe a further hour.
Okay.
You're lucky.
And what do you reckon and you can't sleep when we're traveling, can you? What do you reckon your average sleep time is at the moment?
I'm at 8 hours. I'm a lie.
Yeah, I think I'm managing about 8.
Oh man, I have this thing where I actually go to sleep really quite early, but then I'm up. I wake up and the birds are tweeting at like 5 a.m. and because obviously there's nothing going on outside, it's such a unique sound and atmosphere. So I wake up at 5 every day without fail. Sometimes
maybe you should go into agriculture, Barney.
Maybe I should work the land.
Yeah.
Just suits my physique.
Definitely the main difference is like how early you can go to bed, because if we're on tour, we've done a concert and then we go out for dinner afterwards, you're not in bed until like midnight, whereas here it's like 8 p.m. Not sure.
I was going to say, what do you think is the earliest you've been to bed during lockdown?
About 10:15.
Oh, that's still quite late. I mean, I've also been going to bed. I've been kind of carried on with the late thing. I'm not going to bed before midnight, really.
Okay.
I'm asleep by 11:30.
Yeah, well, I win this then. Grandad here. I'm probably going to bed at 8 p.m.
Oh, wow.
What do you wake up at 5?
I don't think I've seen 11 p.m. awake for a while.
You're making me feel so much better about myself. This is great. Keep going.
I tried to make the 10 o'clock news because the problem is we have news at 6 and 10 in the UK, and at 6 we've only just had the government announcements. They haven't had time to do analysis, so I like to try and catch it at 10 if I can. All right, well, there we go. I'm the granddad. And what about TV then? Who's watching TV?
I've been binge watching a documentary called Cheer on Netflix, which is about
Yes.
and Andrea, I know, has been watching it as well.
Is that different to Cheers, the show, the old show? Okay.
Very.
Right.
So I've just been messaging her at various different stages of stress throughout this program, and she's kind of calming me down, or alternatively saying nothing at all and just being like, yeah, it's going to get worse, hun.
It's going to get worse. No.
So, I've been not been binging, so I've been watching The Mandalorian on Disney Plus because Barney got it as a got the free month, so I was like, yes, I will watch it. But I can't binge it because it's only coming out one episode a week. And I'm like,
done you there, Al.
It's crazy.
I'm also watching.
It's like Disney Plus knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I've been watching MasterChef, which is a UK show for our viewers who might not know it. So I'm now taken to describing my really basic cooking with very technical terms.
Excellent. What kind of cooking have you been doing, Barn? What have you been?
Well,
What have you been sending out?
I'm now an expert at gingerbread men. As some of you, you may have found out that I'm an expert at gingerbread men, or you may be finding out. But in terms of my other dishes, I wouldn't say I've particularly widened my arsenal since I was not in furlough, but I make a very good spaghetti bolognese. I make an excellent toad in the hole. I've made a kind of on the back of my MasterChef viewing, I actually decided to throw some mince in a pan and flavour it myself. And that didn't come out too badly. But I'm trying not to eat pasta. So instead I'm doing everything with rice. But I'm also very good at salmon parcels. It's my other. It's
Lovely.
Probably the top end of my technical ability. How about you guys? I spoke on the show a few weeks ago about doing a choral cookbook. So if you had to submit one recipe to a choral cookbook, what would it be?
Anything chocolate related.
As you go, dessert. You do well on MasterChef because the judge loves chocolate.
I rediscovered this the other day, and I haven't actually cooked anything from it. I'm sorry, Sam Dressel. But for a Secret Santa present, Sam Dressel got me this.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, and I am going to tuck into this with all the leftover Easter egg chocolate that we've got. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't pretend you've got any leftover chocolate, Eleanor.
No. We went out the next week and bought a load of eggs that were like half price. But yeah, I ate all mine straight away.
I've in my household I've nominated myself as the necessary role as chief cake baker. So I'm doing quite a lot of cakes, but I think probably my one would be we do Easter nests every year, which quite a lot of people do. But our family tradition is that you then sit down at a table and you treat marzipan as if it's Play-Doh and make little ducks or other things out of it to put on the eggs.
Okay.
Nice.
Andrea?
Very cute. Oh, it's so difficult. I mean, I'll definitely go savoury since you two are going dessert, kind of. So I would say maybe, I mean, I did a good shepherd's pie this week with a good amount of Worcester sauce in it.
I was going to say, do you put Worcester sauce in your...
Yeah, quite a lot. I really like the kind of kick in that. But I also make quite a good, I brought this up last time, the butter chicken curry.
Mm-hmm. My mouth.
That's kind of a labour of love. It takes hours, but it's really good.
Okay. I would probably
even if I say so myself.
I think my best dishes are either my roast pork, but I think that's a bit, I don't know, if this was a core cookbook for international consumption, then maybe a traditional English roast would be good in there. I do good potatoes, actually, which I learned off my brother Paul, or my spaghetti bolognese, I think would be my two.
That's your whole arsenal gone, Barn.
We haven't done the salmon parcels.
Oh, we haven't done salmon parcels.
Or the gingerbread.
Save that for volume 2.
There you go. So, okay. Now, why don't we talk about something that actually our listeners might get something from, which is, what have you been doing to, other than just our inane banter, what have you been doing to keep busy, creatively speaking? Have you been keeping your mind whirring with anything?
Yeah,
I've just been doing different things.
Yeah, I've been dabbling in guitar. So I've got a friend who's going to give me lessons online. So I'm dabbling in that. And I live in a super creative house in terms of there's just loads of things to make everywhere. So this, some people may have seen on Instagram, was what we made the other day.
Oh wow.
Which was a bit random, and I'm going to put loads of them, hang them around.
Bring it a bit closer to the camera.
So it's not perfect by any means, but it's wool that we put around balloons. So kind of like paper mache, but with wool.
Okay.
And so that was random, but we're doing a crafts day every Saturday. So
cool.
That's kind of what we're doing.
Nice.
Katie, what are you? So your dad's a builder, isn't he? So you must have a lot of DIY stuff going on in the house.
Actually, not that much at the moment. He's been replacing the top of a roof, which has been really interesting.
I haven't been taking part in that.
That's really not very fun. I've been trying to get back at get my levels of piano sight reading up again. So I'm doing a little bit every morning because I'm that cool. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to give myself a variety of music. So I've got a book of Bach and a book of Gershwin. It's one of each every day.
Nice.
So yeah, it's keeping me out of trouble.
All right, Andrea.
Nice. Well, I would have liked been getting better at baking bread over this time, but there is a national shortage of bread flour,
Now,
and that you just can't find it anywhere. So I've got a tiny amount of wholemeal bread flour left over, which I'm saving for the day that I can't get a loaf of bread from the shop. So I'm kind of trying to get into that if I can find any bread flour. So if anybody knows where I can get some, let me know. Other than that, I just thought I'd get out my my sewing machine and start making. I did a few cushion covers about a year ago, and I've got some new material that I got from the shop before Harry Potter material.
Yes.
So I've got one there, and I've got a Marauders map version there.
Amazing.
So yeah, I thought I'd make some cushion covers, just like neat little things like this.
Yeah.
oh, wow. Very handy. And for anyone who hasn't already guessed, whenever a boy loses a button in VOCES8 or splits their trousers, Andrea, on our gig suits, Andrea always sorts us out. We're very
To be
good.
fair, to his credit, Sam Dressel used to do his own.
Okay, he wouldn't like to be dragged into that. I very much don't. Maybe that's my training during furlough.
There have been some amusing mishaps in the past, definitely, haven't there?
I have, yeah. Some embarrassing ones with some of the choreography. Okay, 2 questions to finish then before we let you go. Question number 1 is, do you have a recommendation of something to listen to for something you've enjoyed that you think our viewers should listen to?
Yeah. So so Laura Marling's just brought out a new album, which I've really enjoyed listening to. And Bon Iver brought out a single today on Spotify.
Okay.
So I haven't listened to it yet, but maybe that. But Barney, I took your recommendation to listen through the King's College, Cambridge, B minor mass, not B minor mass.
Matthew Passion. Oh, did you?
Yeah, because
Yeah, some good singing on there.
So I was like, I'm going to listen to it. So really enjoyed that.
Okay, great.
I've also been binge listening to the Matthew Passion at the moment because I've never done it and I want to get to know it. So.
You're learning the arias, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Which recording have you been using, or have you been using a few?
Various. I sat and watched the Berlin Philharmonic have got a video of it, which is semi-staged. So I sat and watched my way through that.
Got the John Passion as well.
I find it really interesting, but it challenges me a bit.
Okay.
I've been listening to an album recently by a guy called Gabriel Kahane. He's an American guy who wrote this album. He took a big train journey across America, and he wrote an album about all of his experiences and the people he met along the way. And it's just a really good storytelling singer-songwriter thing. He's got really cool piano kind of timbre that he uses. It's called The Book of Travelers, and that's really good.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll look those up. Thank you very much. Now, one more question before you go. Honesty hour. I want one thing that you're missing about not being on tour and one thing that's nice about being at home.
I think, aside from missing you guys, which I really, really am, I think I'm missing the variety. Like, life can, without meaning to, feel quite monotonous when you're in the same space, and we're so used to traveling so much. I'm just like, like slightly on edge at like wanting to be doing something different every day and seeing different people. So that, I think, is a big part for me that I'm missing.
All right.
Yeah, I'm definitely missing the sort of the exploration and adventure kind of part of being somewhere that I don't know or somewhere a bit new, and also the food part of it. We're kind of doing my best trying to get world foods into dinners every week, but missing the food. But I'm also really enjoying the chance to get really sort of deep down in sorting out some stuff in my house, throwing some stuff out, Marie Kondo, everything, just get things out and work on it for a few days.
Now, what sorts of things have you been finding in your house, Andrea? It's a chance here for a teaser, I think.
So many things. So yes, it's inspired me somewhat because I actually have a lot of the old sort of photo albums and video footage from very early VOCES8 days. And I've just been thinking about collecting that together, and making a little presentation showing people a little bit of VOCES history.
Okay, so we can look forward to that next couple of weeks. Fantastic. Katie, how about you?
I've been missing meeting a lot of different people, because when we travel you get to meet the audience afterwards, and that's always really good fun. I'm also missing the kind of schedule that being on tour gives you, because it's a slightly different schedule every day. You know what you're doing. Whereas I'm having to, I feel like I've gone back to like revising for exams and setting myself like a schedule for the day, so I don't lose it completely. It's a bit weird, but I'm loving being at home for doing gardening.
Okay.
I read a book a
Three
little while
fingers.
ago. I get obsessive when I find things that I really like. So I'd like planned out everything I was going to do, but when you're on tour, you just don't have that time in the same place. So I'm watching time go by how tall my beetroot is. So that's
Nice.
very fun and very wholesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and joining us. I'm sure everybody will be thrilled to see you all. And it's been lovely to catch up with you. So
Yeah.
I'll be in touch with you very soon, and lots of love in the meantime.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Our lovely ladies there in the Upper Voice Summit. Now, thank you to all of you who have been commenting during that. I have some really good questions here, which we'll get on with now. Harvey Lokkahai says, what suggestions would you have for a young countertenor that's just begun to develop his falsetto? Very good question. Every falsetto, well, every voice, but every falsetto especially is really quite different. I think that it's important to realise which parts of the voice you're singing in are what you might consider to be more natural for you, and which parts you're going to have to develop because they're not necessarily, the falsetto is not necessarily the natural part of the voice you would use in that instance. So for me, that means anything, I'm a baritone, bass baritone, so anything above a kind of E flat or E, just above middle C, I would then be using my falsetto naturally anyway. But then anything below that, so coming off the bottom of the treble clef stave, I'm going to have to really use a false part of the voice for. So I would suggest that you should start very much in the middle of the voice, and don't expect to have a very big range, and don't expect for it to be particularly powerful either. Just do lots of gentle vocal eases. A very good vowel to start with to find the falsetto resonance is the E vowel. So starting with the E vowel brings the chords nice and close together, and then in the middle of the voice, just lots of little gentle exercises. Often with my singing teacher, I work in exercises of just a third, sometimes a minor third. So really small little exercises, and then growing the range out. I would always start with the more natural part of the voice, so middle and upper, and then come into the lower part of the register at the end. If you want to really truly learn how to access the lower part of the register, I always think that sliding down into it from the more natural part of the register is the best thing to do. One thing I talk about with my singing teacher is the different qualities of sound in different parts of the voice. So we're trying to sound much more like an owl at the top of the voice, and much more like a duck at the bottom of the voice. So trying to find those, obviously not very pretty when you just do them now, but trying to find those sorts of sonorities rather than necessarily trying to manipulate too much. So that would be my advice. It's a very tricky thing, and so definitely take it slowly. And whilst you're doing it, make sure you're also practicing in the baritone or your natural register, whatever that would be for you as well, so the voice remains nice and healthy. And the last thing to say is never push it. The amount of countertenors who we meet who are pushing up all the time in order to try and get the high notes, this is the worst thing possible. Really low larynx sitting on top of the voice. Hope that's helpful, Harvey. Paul says, do you have a recommended exercise for improving breathing or breath control? The funny thing about breath control, Paul, is that people think good breath control is the longer that you can last. And there's an element of that which I think is correct. But something we think about in the group as well is about the consistency of the airflow that we're achieving. So a really good exercise, I think, is to get a bowl of water and to get a straw and to take a nice deep breath in, make sure the breath goes really low, always thinking to the pelvic floor, and then just see how long you can blow bubbles into the water for with the straw. Whilst you're doing that, really work on the consistency of the bubbles, and that will actually really help you to engage with your core muscles, which is what's going to help you then get better breath control in essence. And then when you take that into singing, really just observe what's going on with the core muscles here. So much of the time when we want to when we want to sing for a long phrase, we hold the breath up here. And this is not so good. We want to be doing all the work in the core. So get that straw and that bowl of water out. Let's have a look. Belinda Stieler says, how do you choose and find your repertoire? Number of different ways, Belinda. We will often, of course, choose the piece ourselves because we like it or because it fits into a particular program that maybe we're thinking about at that time. Another thing that quite often happens to us is that a festival or a promoter who we're working with asks us to sing a particular piece or asks us to sing a particular theme to fit in with the festival. That's with the pop and jazz side, a lot of it comes from the arrangers. I mentioned earlier in the show that we work with about 6 arrangers. Jim Clement's our arranger in residence and about 5 or 6 other people. And we will often discuss with the arrangers the sorts of pieces they would like to arrange. So we're not just going and saying, please arrange this. We always want them to have the idea, if at all possible. So I might go to Jim and say, hey, can I have a new swing tune? And he'll then possibly decide what that tune might be, for example. So a few different ways, and we put it all in the melting pot and come out with what we hope are entertaining programs for you. Troy Jones says, is there a dream piece that you or anyone else in the group have wanted to perform but couldn't do for whatever reason? I think probably quite a few, Troy. A lot of pieces, a lot of great choral pieces have accompaniment. So that's problems that we come out with. But what I might do is I might survey the group for you. So next time I come on, I can let you know. Of course, for me, I would love to do a Matthew Passion. We have 8 singers, but no orchestra, for example. Robert Augdry says, when the alto parts divide, how do you all decide who sings high and low now that Katie's in the group? Well, Katie's actually the, in inverted commas, first alto and I'm second, so that would be our default. But sometimes, as in all the other voice parts as well, we have a first and second, but sometimes we choose not to split like that, depending perhaps on the timbre of the music. So we think about it like an orchestrator or a composer would think about orchestrating a score. If a sound wants to be, perhaps take on the character of a French horn in the alto part, then I might take that, whereas if it wants to be more oboe-esque, then Katie might take it, for example, and we work on it a little bit like that. One more for now, and this is from Marie Humbert, who says, same question as above, and more specifically, how do you achieve such a pure sound while keeping your larynx low and relaxed? It's a very good question. I think it's all about spinning the voice. So really, I have this sensation that I take a deep breath, the larynx goes down, and then I just sit on top of the voice. So, and people often say to us, how do we sing without vibrato? A lot of the time we're not singing without vibrato, we're just singing with a very small amount of vibrato. So what you can do, Marie, is get the voice nice and low and spin. Just let the sound spin and then just try and take away a bit of the vibrato so you're not giving it so much freedom. And we do that by working to hold exactly what we were talking about with Harvey earlier on, working with that idea of breath and really engaging the support. You can hear there's a little bit of vibrato in my sound, but the moment that you go 5 feet away, you won't be able to hear that. So a lot of it is spinning. It's also fair to say that people in the group have different rates of vibrato and manage it in different ways. Andrea has virtually no sort of natural vibrato, so finds it very easy to sing with the straight tone. So you've got to find your own personal way to do it. If you'd like to ask a question, please get on those comments and ask away, and we'll be watching those throughout the whole show and trying to give you some good answers which will hopefully be useful for you at home. And now, for those of you who've been watching Choral Question Time for the past few weeks, you'll already know that I love the music of J.S. Bach, and I love Bach even more when it's done by the Bach Collegium Japan. Next week, I'll be changing it up a little bit and bringing you something a bit different. But this week, I couldn't resist sharing with you a track from a compilation album from the Bach Collegium Japan called A Choral Year with Bach that's available on the BIS label. This is the piece that actually I have as my power song when I'm out running. I'm that cool. And if the piece itself isn't extraordinary enough, it will amaze you even further to know that the cantata chorus I'm going to play only partly survives in original source material. And so it had to be completed, reconstructed by Masato Suzuki, who is the son of conductor in the recording I'm going to play, Masaki Suzuki. The chorus is Sing it dem Herrn ein neues Lied from Cantata 190, which was performed for the very first time on January the 1st, so New Year's Day, in 1724. And that was the first new year after Bach assumed his duties in Leipzig. It's come down to us, as I said, only in fragmentary form. The only things that still existed when Masato got the score were the vocal lines and the 2 violin parts. So he then constructed the rest of the orchestral parts, for which I will be forever thankful to him. The text of the opening chorus is based on verses from Psalms 149 and 150, and it focuses entirely upon praise and thanks. It's put together in a way that resembles Bach's motet of the same name, BWV 225, a work I'm sure many of you will be familiar with as choral singers, and one, of course, that VOCES8 recorded on our Bach Motets album back in 2010. I think the most fantastic moment in this cantata chorus comes with the insertion of 2 lines from the Luther's German Te Deum of 1529, and these 2 lines are placed between the psalm verses, and Bach sets them in an incredible way with octave unison plain chant in the choir. So it goes from being this really elaborate, huge, fugal-based choral texture with an ornate orchestral accompaniment to suddenly just being one choral line in unison. It's incredibly powerful. So take a listen. This is Singet dem Herrn ein neues Lied from A Choral Year by Bach Collegium Japan. It's Cantata 190. What a piece of music. That was the Bach Collegium Japan singing you the opening chorus of Cantata 190, Singet dem Herrn ein neues Lied. And it comes from my CD recommendation of the week. It's called A Choral Year with Bach. It's the Bach Collegium, and you can find that on the BIS label. And thanks again to my wonderful friend Masato Suzuki, who was the person who actually completed that score, reconstructed it. So congratulations, Masato, for a wonderful, wonderful job. We've got so many incredible questions coming across our two platforms, Facebook and YouTube. So I'm just going to see if I can answer a few more quick-fire questions before we go on to our next feature. Pyle John says, for Renaissance and Baroque, one should not use too much vibrato. Is that correct? And how would you do that? I think it depends completely. You're probably referring mostly to individual styles of singing. Of course, we know when we get into the bel canto school and the sorts of sounds that we would consider more romantic if we think about opera singing, the vibrato tends to be, Mary Bevan came on this show just a couple of days ago and said, you know, one of the biggest differences between choral singing and solo singing is that she's able to vibrate around the note and we have to go arrow through the middle. So perhaps these are sort of things you're referring to. And I think in VOCES8, the way we think about it is that when our line is individual, so when we're singing something like a piece of Renaissance polyphony, or if we were singing a piece of Bach like that, then within reason we can use some vibrato. We wouldn't want to wobble around to the point that the note becomes very, very dramatic, or that you can't tell really clearly what the note is, because then it doesn't work so well in the multi-voice texture. So we're just always thinking to control the vibrato a little bit rather than taking it away in Renaissance and Baroque music. The moment the music becomes more chordal, so you could think about a piece like Bird's Ave Verum, for example, we will then want to reduce the vibrato to almost nothing. How do we do it? Well, I think it's important to know that the more you sing into the voice, the more vibrato you will naturally achieve. So if we want to get rid of vibrato completely, a lot of the time we will sing a little bit softer. If we want to have good control of the vibrato, then again we're working with our core. I think when I'm singing that I take my breath in and then I just tuck my stomach in a little bit, which gives a very good amount of support to my breath, which then means that nothing's getting too far away from me and nothing's being allowed to sort of flap in the wind, as it were. So I'm always keeping a very high level of support. And that, for me, when I want to reduce the vibrato, I just squeeze on my core muscles a little bit more, and that helps to control the airflow, which helps with my vibrato. So I hope that's useful. You can try that at home. Try really squeezing in, almost as though a lot of times we use the imagery that you're stretching a rubber band and then letting it go. And imagine your diaphragm as that rubber band. So pulling in and stretching sideways, and see what happens to the sound of your voice and the regulation of your vibrato and the size of your vibrato when you sing like that. Bianca Cloder, wouldn't the St. Matthew Passion then not be perfect for a piece to be done at Milton Abbey? Yes, Bianca, absolutely it would. Bianca's a great friend of ours. And in fact, if anybody tuned in to hear our album launch, or you've caught up with our album this week, there are 2 pieces of German music on it, and Bianca was very patient in coming to coach our German. So if you thought it was good, give her a pat on the back. If you didn't think it was great, make sure you drop her a comment on the feed and tell her why not, and we can hopefully improve next time. It would be great to do at Milton Abbey. I'd love also, Bianca, to do Cantata 190 at Milton Abbey with the Academy of Ancient Music. Wouldn't that be fabulous? Jerry Van Zeil, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Jerry, says, hi Barney, my question is regarding recording. Do you always record as an ensemble, or have you recorded individual voices in different pieces and then mix them? And how do you overcome the effect of a different environment and acoustics and quality of recordings when you do the mix? Well, we would normally, Jerry, always record standing in the same room. So you can go and find some videos on YouTube. The Bach that we released this week is a very good example, last week, sorry, which actually shows how we record, just 8 of us huddled around a couple of microphones. We do sometimes do single tracking. That tends to be more in the idiom of pop music. And we're actually training ourselves at the moment to work in that environment because, of course, we're struggling to get together. The thing that we use, I've got it right here, I can just whip it off my microphone. Thing that we use to deal with the acoustic is one of these, which the microphone, there's a hole in the bottom, and the microphone comes up through the hole. So I'm being mirrored on my thing, so it's quite difficult for me to do it. But the microphone would then be here, and on the front, I can then put a pop shield. And just the fact that the microphone is encased in this foam means that it's completely dead, and so there's no acoustic at all. And so everybody then submits their tracks recorded in that way, and you can't tell. But as I say, there's only one CD on the market that's recorded like that by VOCES8, and that's our Aces High album. So you can go and check that out. It's a very different way of working, quite cool. Let's see. So Donna says, with young singers, how do you teach vibrato, or do you let it develop naturally? I mean, I would say, how do you term young? I don't think vibrato is something we should necessarily be dealing with at all until singers are getting into a decent level of maturity. One thing we can find with young singers is that they imitate. And so something I find when I'm teaching a singing lesson is I'll sing something and there'll be a natural level of vibrato in my voice, and suddenly the sound that comes back to me from my student, let's say they're a boy treble, is very mezzo-soprano-y and got a lot of contralto in it and a lot of vibrato. So I wouldn't say we encourage it. We then talk to them about what their natural sound is and all that sort of stuff. I think all of these things, letting them come organically, is a great thing to do. So much of the time young singers will be faking vibrato, just increasing it by wobbling whatever part of the anatomy in order to bring vibrato. So I always think trying to get them not to do that is a very good thing. And then when they are old enough, if you've taught them to sing well enough with legato and good support, then the vibrato begins to come of its own accord. And of course, then hearing that with them and working that out is a very good thing. But the real key, I think, is that legato quality of legato singing is a very good thing to be teaching, and the vibrato finds its own way as a consequence. One more then before we go on to our next little feature. Sydney Lang says, oh, this is a good question, Sydney. How can I find the difference between my head voice and my falsetto as a soprano? A very good question. I think there's an element as a soprano of what we call whistle tone, so really getting into the high end of the squeak. And perhaps Andrea is going to develop some sort of answer to this, which we might be able to put on another week's show, because really it requires a demonstration. I would say falsetto feels like it's on the outside of the vocal folds. To me, that's the sensation. So the moment that you feel you're not fully on the voice and you're really up high, it's that feeling of sensation of being on the outside of the voice would be the key, I think. Now, last week we celebrated the release of the third segment of VOCES8's 15th anniversary recording project. All that stuff's on YouTube, the album launch party, and you can go and look up the new disc. It's called After Silence 3 Redemption. It's on all your streaming services. And let me see, today, yes, I'm just trying to get my train of thought. Today I'm going to look ahead to the fourth and final chapter, which Martin Bonsey referenced earlier in his question. That's called After Silence 4 Elemental. It's out on the 5th of June, and I've prepared a little sneak peek of it for you. This is a song I'm sure many of our American audience will know. It's called The Earth Song by Frank Ticelli. That was the Earth Song by Frank Ticelli, which is going to appear on the next chapter of After Silence, which is released on the 5th of June. I now have a question from Italian Findart, who asks, VOCES8 doesn't have a very big turnover amongst singers, but when this happens, how difficult is it to find the right singer with the right voice, colour, type, etc.? Well, it is quite difficult to find the right singer, and we go through many different rounds of auditions, 4 or 5 rounds in total, to be honest. And as part of that process, the first thing we do is hear everybody's voice. They come and sing solo. Then we take the voices that we really like and we've really warmed to and we've listened to them, and we put them into the group environment to see how they work in the group environment. And after that, we pick the singers who we think work well in the group environment and go through a few sort of stages of working with them as a member of the team to see how well that's going to work. To be honest, I think one of the things that we really try to do in VOCES8 is to take great voices and try and make them work in the group rather than look for a voice that necessarily fits straight away. Because if you just look for voices that all fit together, they can be a little bit monochrome in terms of their colours. They can all end up being very similar, and that doesn't always turn out to be the most interesting sound and give us the widest possible palette of colour to use in our performances. So we're always going through lots of different rounds and working out then, when someone does get the job, how they can... okay, so I'm just being told to check my phone, so I'll do that in 2 seconds. I'm just being so we're always trying to fit them in rather than looking for the specifically perfectly fitted singer, if that makes sense. We also have a question from Jake Runestad, who says, nice to see you, Jake. Fantastic composer, love singing your work. Jake asks about my cuddly toys. Well, there's an addition today, which is my lion Drambuie, and he came to me when I was at boarding school when I was younger, and I needed something to keep me company in my dorm room, so that's Drambuie. Now I'm going to move on to my next feature, and that will also give me the opportunity to check my phone and get some of Andrea's messages. And we've just listened to Ticelli's Earth Song, and of course that's looking forward to a release that's coming on the 5th of June. So having looked forward, I'm now going to spend a few minutes venturing back into the group's history. First of all, to play you a recording from our 2011 album, A Choral Tapestry, and that track features a rather good bass solo, so listen out for that, and then who knows what's going to happen after that. This, to begin with, is Steal Away.
My Lord, he calls me by the thunder. The trumpet sounds within on my soul. I ain't got long to stay, long to stay. Steal away trees are bending, poor sinner stands a-trembling. The trumpet sounds within of my soul, I ain't got long to stay. I ain't got long to stay. Still
I've just played the group's recording from almost a decade ago, it's difficult to believe, of Steal Away from our Choral Tapestry album, and it features a booming bass solo by Dingle Yandell, a sound I think that once you've heard it, you'll probably recognise it anywhere, and luckily a sound that you can hear in more and more opera houses and concert halls around the world as the years go by. I'm delighted that Dingle's joined me today for a catch-up, so thanks very much for being here, Ding. It's lovely to see you.
Thanks, Barn. Great to be here. Thanks
I'm sure many members of the viewing public will still remember your glory years of being in the group, which you left us almost 5 years ago now, which is also difficult to believe. You were a founder member, did a decade or so with the ensemble. And so my first question then is, where have you got to these days? What are you up to? What are the gigs that you've been absolutely killing for the last few months?
Well, I mean, 5 years, it's amazing how far you come. About a month ago, we were on the final floor run of Midsummer Night's Dream up in Scotland, and we went through the whole opera, and then the director of the Scottish Opera came in and said, that's it, guys, you're going to have to go home. And that was when sort of the coronavirus pandemic really struck home, and we'd been doing 6 weeks of rehearsal, and suddenly it was all shut down. So the last thing I was doing was Midsummer Night's Dream, which is absolutely fresh in the memory.
And that was with Scottish Opera?
Yeah, it was, who have been an incredible support for me. In fact, you're talking about where have I come from, where have I come in the last 5 years? Well, they have been really instrumental in helping me in the opera world, I would say. In some ways, taking me under their wing and giving me opportunities along the way, and also helping me progress vocally in a healthy way, not pushing me into too many big roles, and applying me appropriately to the appropriate roles at the right time. And
really important. It's a good thing for the young singers who are watching to know. We'll come to that maybe a little bit later on, is probably don't take on roles that are too big for you too soon. And I'm not sure I know anybody with a bigger voice than you, and you're still saying, I didn't want to take on roles that were too big for me. So I think there's a lesson for us all there. You're singing concerts as well, or just doing the opera?
Yeah, I'm doing concerts. Well, sadly, I mean, obviously everything's been cancelled now. But I did my sort of what I would assume to be one of my first proper Elijahs in Austin a couple of months back with an old friend called Mark Dupere, who played cello on our recording of the Marcello Psalms. It's amazing how these connections. And he and his father emailed out of the blue and said, look, we're doing an Elijah with our church, would you like to come and sing the role? I said, absolutely. I mean, it's a real fabulous role for my type of voice, and funnily enough, I might not be able to do it too long because the voice is dropping slightly, and it sits in between that bass baritone area. So you've got to be sort of a bass baritone with a high bit to your voice, really do it, because especially at the end, because you've got that absolutely beautiful but murderous last movement for the mount. What is it? For the mountain shall depart, which is beautiful, but by that time you're out of puff.
Pace yourself. Now you mentioned
so that was great. That was fabulous.
You mentioned the Marcello Psalms CD, which I think we recorded in the summer of 2012. And one of the things I really remember about recording that album is I think it was a little bit of a turning point for you as a singer, because you had a lot of solo material on the disc. And I'd actually point all our viewers to go and dig it out on your streaming service afterwards. The disc is called Marcello, that's Marcello, Marcello Psalms. And yeah, you had all this solo work, and I remember everybody just sort of turning and looking at you, and the voice had really grown, and you were growing into the roles themselves. And so I think we always knew that you had the most incredible instrument, seemingly a voice, I think, that would probably take you anywhere that you wanted to go and apply it. But you've now left for 5 years, and you're making great progress in the world of solo singing and opera. But has it always been easy? I mean, what's your journey been? There must have been tough times as well as there.
Well, the power of hindsight is amazing, because I look back and I think at where my voice was when I was singing 2012, 2016, and up here to 2020, and there is so much you can add on top, or so much you can add sideways to your voice and your technique, and it's a never-ending thing. So I've had to, sort of self-humble a bit, because back in 2012 I thought, this is sounding good, but if I listen back to that now, I think, it's amazing how much extra depth I've found in my voice here and there. One of the most important things has been legato in the voice, which has been a constant battle for me personally, coming from the a cappella world, and legato in the voice, which is I could go down a tangent now, but that's quite crucial, because when we were singing a cappella, you have precision was quite key, precision in tuning, precision in blending with other people, so that you didn't stick out because of your ropey tuning or something like that, and blend, and all these things require a certain amount of control. And one of the things I really had to learn to do was to just completely let the go of the voice and let the control go, which is quite terrifying, because you think, where the hell is this going to go? And so what happens is you let it go, and it goes wide like this, and you think, okay, those are the perimeters, that's the edge of my universe vocally. And then you start to sort of hone it in and wrap it and curve it and sand it off, and that's when you start to realize
one of the things I've noticed about the singing I've seen from you in the last few years since you left is that the areas of your voice, they've always been there. You used to make some unbelievable sounds in VOCES8, but there was always an element of it being like one of those horses that you see sort of galloping across the prairies with a big mane. It's just sort of, you look at it and you think, well, that's an incredible beast, but I'm not sure I could ever tame it. And one of the things that I love about your singing now, and we're going to play some of it a little bit later, and you'll be able to hear it, is how when you get up to the extremities of the instrument, it's so beautifully, it has the beast about it that it always had, but it's under control. And for me, that really touches me, because I can appreciate the progress that you've made, and I love it, absolutely love it. So you spoke with the Scottish Opera thing about them putting you into roles that were sort of suitable for you at the moment. So we've talked about where you've come from. Now, where do you want to go? What are the roles that you're aspiring to, or the concert platforms or pieces that you really want to see yourself doing in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Because I'm a low voice, because I'm a bass, and I'm doing bass rep and bass baritone rep, there's a lot of waiting around still. I mean, technically I'm still quite a young bass, which makes me feel great, because the old joints are creaking.
Makes you feel better about the fact you're approaching 40, right? The fact you're still considered young.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I'll go on to talk about how that's worth remembering as a young bass. Absolutely. And that word has been passed down to me, and then I'll pass that down to another young bass. But you really have to be patient. You really have to be patient and take roles that are the small ones, but it can be tricky because young bass roles are few and far between. So I sort of find myself doing roles like Colline in La Bohème, which just suits me down to the ground. I love it and it interests me. And for example, I did a small role called Count Ciprano in a Rigoletto, which is part of a sort of Three Stooge group. And I did the speaker in Magic Flute, which has started to become quite a role for me. And what I noticed was that quite a lot of these roles were quite authoritative. But what I'm looking forward to is taking it up a notch. So, which is happening actually in 2021. So I'll be doing Don Pizarro in Fidelio for Glyndebourne tour. So I'm really pleased because I've managed to get myself a place at Glyndebourne Festival and the tour. So I'll be doing the speaker in Magic Flute for Glyndebourne Festival, which will be such an achievement, but also prestigious, and some of the singers that I'll be singing alongside will just be fantastic. So that'll be a learning curve, and it'll be wonderful. And then taking the role of Don Pizarro, which is another quite a big role actually, and it's quite another one that's just an authoritarian figure. He's intimidating. He's not very nice actually, but those are the most fun actually.
Well, you're gonna have to let us know where we can all get tickets, because I know at Glyndebourne they're almost impossible to come by, even if we were to try now. But I think you probably might just have sold a few more. Very, very exciting.
Well, my mum will be able to get the tickets. If anyone can get the tickets, Mum.
Barbs can get the tickets. Okay, I'll get in touch with Barbs. So come on, let's reminisce a little bit. I said earlier that you did a decade with the group. Are there any memories in particular, fond memories that stick out to you, things that you remember?
So many, and I'm so glad I documented it as well. So I wrote quite a few diaries in the early years of our touring and when we were fledgling, but also lots of video footage and lots of photographs, which I was actually going back through because of all this time we have on our hands. I was going back through a lot of it the other day, and I'm so pleased I documented it because it's such an unusual, unique life, and it was just great going back. The annoying thing is that I was sort of a bit blasé about it, so I go through some of these videos and I start a video and I'll say, well, here we are in where was it? Somewhere in Germany. I don't actually remember any of these small towns that we went to, which of course were all beautiful, and these churches were absolutely beautiful and things like that, but it was a bit blasé. But
you know, Andrea is putting together a sort of historical documentary for our live from home series. So perhaps I know she's got a huge amount of material, but perhaps you could be in touch with her and pass on some little morsels to share with our audience, because so that we can.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and absolutely, yeah.
You'd probably be asked to feature on that as well. One thing I remember about you is just your sense of humour, which was always very good fun in the dressing room. And something that our viewers can go and look up is that in 2012 we did a really, really long US tour. We did 35 concerts in 42 days, which actually, I mean, in the music industry of kind of touring groups is things like, you know, circuses and all those sort of types of things, or cruise ships and stuff like that, actually isn't particularly unusual. But for us and the type of music that we do, it's very unusual. And we documented it. We made a 3-minute video of every day, do you remember, of the US tour. So if you go and type into YouTube VOCES8 US tour 2012, you'll find 42 days. Now, some of them are bland because not a lot happened, but some of them are absolutely brilliant. It was all cut together by my brother Paul, and I think it shows you at your best light, Ding. We had some funny times on those. Oh
gosh, well, great effort by Paul, because I remember him editing those in the front of the car every single day for quite a while. And I think silliness and humour was so important, and probably still are actually.
Keeps you sane on the road, having a good time.
And what I've learned is in the opera world is I personally think there are a lot of people with interesting hobbies, and I think that is a way of completely detaching from what can be a stressful, anxiety-ridden, tense, absolute.
You're breaking up there, Ding.
And when you're on tour, it's very hard to do the gardening in your garden. So
yeah,
I think humour and silliness and were just great. A really good remedy for that.
Something I've been dying to ask you, a question we get asked so much. We go into a lot of educational institutions, and we maybe are working with a college program, and they have this thing where a lot of the students in the choir are there as voice majors. So they're, 18, 19, 20, 21, let's say 18 to 26 years old, and they're being asked to sing in choir on one side of it, and then the other side of it, their singing teachers are asking them to sing opera, and they get pulled in two different directions. You actually spoke about it a little bit at the beginning of this chat that we're having. I wonder how you feel about how your time in the group has had an impression on where you've ended up today. Would you do the same thing again, or are there things that you've learned from coming from choral music or having choral music as part of your career that have impact on your opera? I just wonder if you would share your thoughts on that.
It's a really interesting point, and it's something I often think about, especially when I'm in rehearsal periods and processes. And actually, by accident, it was possibly the best thing I could have ever done because of my voice type. So learning what was absolutely crucial and absolutely vital for me was getting performance experience in front of people who had bought a ticket and wanted to be entertained. That was absolutely crucial for me, and being thrust into that. And that's exactly what VOCES8 did. That was one of the first crucial things. And it meant that I also did 10 years of that, of being on stage, on the road. Practically, it was, as much as I did an undergraduate degree and learned about the basics and the techniques and languages and all that stuff, which is all really, really important. Getting out there and getting on the road couldn't have been a better maneuver for me. And in other senses as well, financially, me having an actual job for 10 years meant that I wasn't at college forever and ever, coming out of it in huge amounts of debt and trying to be a bass at the age of 25 and nobody employing me because I'm too young and not ready yet. And that is potentially a controversial point, but that for me was crucial. And it was a little bit by accident. I didn't really have a 10-year plan like that, but it worked in my favor because vocally I needed to move on and try and tame the voice and see where I can take it. But also I had this wealth of musicality and experience of live singing techniques, learning how to sing with other people, being a good colleague, being professional. All those things were vital, and so there was loads of positives. There's a couple of things that have been tricky, like I talked about the line in the voice, having line in the voice, which is something I've had to really, really work on. Just being in a completely different environment where you're jumping around and trying to sing without standing still. But also, I also do think I'm an incredibly good singing blender, which I think is vital in the opera world, because you have duets, trios, quartets, sextets, and it's put me in great stead because I think I'm a really good ensemble singer in those moments. So that's great too.
No doubt about that. So to finish then, two questions. First question, what would be your number one, I think I can almost guess this from what you said already, what would be your number one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring young bass? Or a flip side of that is, what's the best piece of advice that you yourself have ever been given when you were a young bass? And point number two, you can have a bit of fun with this perhaps. What would be your one piece of advice for the current members of VOCES8? Here you are, a founder member, did 10 years, left 5 years ago. What's your advice for the kids doing the block at the moment?
Oh, back in my day. Well, I mean, first of all, before we go there, just before I forget, the very first question you gave me was, where have you come from in the last 5 years? I must mention that I got married.
Oh, yes.
I will be in the doghouse, which
fond memories of the group. You met your now wife.
Yeah, just remember that one, considering I'm in lockdown for the next 6 months with her. was a former member, which is Emily, and that has been one of the greatest bits of the last 5 years. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm pleased to say that we're going to be catching up with Emily next week on Choral Question Time. So you can tune in for that and see if she manages to mention it quicker than Ding did.
Great recovery there, Dingle.
Very good.
So what advice would I give to a fledgling bass? Was that the first one?
Yes.
For basses, I think it's time. Just take your time. It's going to take a long time before people take you not seriously, but people start booking you for things. If you want to go more into the opera, take your time. And actually, I'd recommend joining an ensemble. It's not that easy, but or starting your own ensemble and learning musicality and getting out on the road if you can, and getting yourself a few gigs. I think that's really quite crucial. I didn't get the gigs. You got the gigs, Barney, but it was.
But you nailed them, Ding. That's what counts.
Well, the point was, you were like, you got to get on stage and do it, and I was like, okay, right. And actually, it was baptism by fire, if that's the right way to think of it. So be patient. Work on your voice. Try lots of different types of repertoire. Don't try massive repertoire. Don't try and sing Hagen. I mean, or any Wagner for that matter. Have a listen to it. And then get a good teacher and stick with them. Don't stick with a teacher that's horrible to you. Be one that's there to encourage. Be with one that's in there to encourage you, and be kind and nurture you, and not kill the love of singing.
Mm-hmm.
That's for me. That's really important. And I'd say that's the most crucial thing. And patience is golden.
And what would you say to the current crop of VOCES8ites?
Oh God! Well, you guys are sounding really, really excellent. I was thinking the other day, gosh, I'm not sure I would have anything to add. I mean, if you got me in there to, I don't know, have a workshop or just a separate pair of ears to listen to. I mean, you've really now over how many years is it now? The group's been going 15.
This is the 15th year, yeah.
15th year. I mean, you've really honed a cappella. I mean, you are absolute specialists. And the only advice I'd probably give is don't wish it away. Try and enjoy the unusual nature of the job. It's such an unusual job. You'll look back and tell your grandchildren or your cousin, your nieces and nephews or whoever, and look back and say, look what I did. This was really interesting. Document it, and also do things like go to galleries and go to theatres and experience other types of music, and remember that there's a big world of alternative things out there. And because I remember in VOCES8, sometimes it was really hard to not be in VOCES8 mode, and I had to remember that there were other things that could encourage you to, or you could bring to your performance and bring and that kind of thing. And
well, I think the fact that you kept a diary as well is something I've always been very jealous of, and the amount of pictures you took. So that's
well, it's for everyone. It's for all of you. And I don't, there may be no.
I would love it if you typed up your diary. Please, I'll pay for someone to type up your diary. It would make my day. Apart from that, I'll find out what you said about me.
Oh my God, it'll be embarrassing. I can tell you that.
Right, Ding, it's been such a pleasure catching up. I'm sure all the people watching, if they didn't know you when you were in the group, will be looking into the archives for all those recordings that you featured on. And for those of us, of course, who've always been your fans, thank you for continuing to be an inspiring performer and a fantastic musician. And we will never get tired of hearing your incredible voice. To give us an insight into the singing that you're doing at the moment, so people can appreciate what a wonderful singer that you are, I've managed to uncover an aria on a webcast of the Johannes Passion that you did recently in Russia. Everything on the website is Russian, so I can't actually tell who you're doing it with. Can you tell us who else is appearing in this video?
So it was quite a big gig, actually. It was Maxim Emelianichev, which I think I pronounced his name right, who is a really fantastic conductor, really up-and-coming young conductor who is making really great headway, alongside some fabulous singers, Wilhelm Worms and David Webb and Mei Li Li, and the choir of the Moscow State Choir, Moscow Philharmonic Choir, something like that. It was at the Tchaikovsky Concert Hall, I think, which was quite a prestigious concert hall, and amazing because I could add that to my collection, because when we were in VOCES8, we sang at the Moscow State House of Music.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
And the Bolshoi, didn't we? Bolshoi Theatre or something. So
yeah, no, it's the other famous one. The I can't off the top of my head now. In St. Petersburg.
Yeah, I can't remember. So I've collected that card for my top.
Completely gone out of my mind.
Yeah.
Really famous one in St. Petersburg.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's just like me on my videos. So that was really great. Really great. Great orchestra. It was at 442, so I was a bit late.
Well, look, here it is then. Thanks for joining us. And to sign off, you'll sign off in style, singing the aria Alt ihr angefochten Seelen from the Johannes Passion. Take care, Ding. Thank you.
Cheers, Bar. Thanks very much.
Halt, ihr angefochtenen Seelen, ihr angefochtenen Seelen, halt, ihr angefochtenen Seelen, halt, ihr angefochtenen Seelen, ihr angefochtenen Seelen, die aus euren
It was wonderful to catch up with founding member of the group, founding bass in VOCES8, Dingle Yandell. Did a decade with the group, left us almost 5 years ago now, and you can hear what a magnificent singer he is. If you'd like to see the whole of that video, it's going to be available on our YouTube feed, and I'll stick a link down for that on this video once we have finished today's live stream. Now, those of you who watch these live streams regularly will realise that we do run a competition each time, and I've yet to announce the competition winners from my last Choral Question Time a week ago, and also from the album launch party last Friday. So firstly, last Tuesday on Choral Question Time, I asked you to identify a piece from hearing the introduction. That piece was Stanford's Coronation Gloria, and congratulations to Elliot Mercer. A CD is on its way to you. And at the album launch, I played a piece of Bach's instrumental music and asked you which cantata he derived the opening chorus from using this instrumental work. The instrumental work was the Orchestral Suite No. 4 in D major, and the cantata was Unser Mund sei voll Lachens, BWV 110. And congratulations to Jörg Kalkas. There's a CD in the post to you as well. That CD is this new copy of our After Silence Compendium album, not released until the 24th of July. You do have a chance to win a copy today as well. And our competition question this week is something a little bit different. It's baby photo time. So the question is simple. Which current member of VOCES8 is pictured here as a baby? You can only give one answer, and as usual, you can enter by sending an email to me at barnaby@voces8.com, and entries will close this Friday at 5 p.m. UK time. So, which member of VOCES8 is this the baby picture for? There you go. Answers on a postcard to my email address, please. Let's see. It'll be very interesting. I think there's a bit of a giveaway in there, so let's see how many people can get that. Now, we've had some fantastic questions and lovely comments whilst Dingle's been on air with me, so we'll see if we can pick up a few of those. A lot of people saying how nice it is to see him, of course, and it was my absolute pleasure to catch up with him. Amazing voice and even more amazing guy, as I'm sure you can tell, and any of you who have ever met him will almost certainly know. We've had a non-technical question from a guy from from a guy called Paul, who says, "Hi Barney, do you have any tips for healing a sore throat?" Well, I think everybody in VOCES8 deals with this a little bit differently. Of course, doing as little singing on it and aggravating it in that sense, in that way as you possibly can, is very important. Now, I myself use ibuprofen to try and keep the swelling down, and then I drink a lot of ginger and lemon tea. Another thing that we use in VOCES8 is a sort of multivitamin drink. Mine's called Barocca, making sure that to try and keep, of course, illness away, but then when we are ill, making sure that our immune system is really up to the job for fighting it. And of course, your diet's very important with that. So yeah, lemon and ginger, honey, all that kind of stuff, but really not singing, I think, is if you can possibly avoid it. And of course, sometimes we have to, so then it becomes a real balancing act and managing the schedule in that way when we're unwell. JD Black says, "What have you guys been working on to improve your voice while in quarantine?" Well, we've actually been going through a series of exercises as individuals to try and keep. One of the things that's going to go out the window if we're not careful is the sort of flexibility that we need in the instrument in order to make the more specialist noises, the not so natural noises that you make in everyday singing in VOCES8. So going through a whole series of exercises because we expect that when we can go back to singing, bam, we'll have to hit the ground running. So really being match fit in that sense is really important for us, JD. Francisco Fernandez says, "Any exercises recommended for improving intonation?" Yes, very hot topic this, isn't it, Fernandez? We actually do intonation exercises more often than not at the beginning of our rehearsals. And I would say the simpler the better, because if you can tune the really simple chords, then that's going to provide you with a very good grounding for adding in some of those additional harmonies. So we tend to do a progression of just chord 1 to chord 4 to chord 5 to chord 1. And we just hum that around, and everybody in the group is encouraged to improvise, and that way we can just begin to really listen carefully into the intonation, and then we'll end on a final chord and really make sure we take a bit of time to not just tune but also to balance those chords. Then we have an exercise of extended harmony, which actually we will probably end up doing a little bit of a video about on here, so keep your eyes out for that. Del Merritt says, "Barney, since you shifted from your upper register to your lower register, are there any VOCES8 pieces where you've sung both bass or baritone and countertenor?" A little bit, Del, and actually on the voicing sheet, which we send to composers and arrangers, it says that obviously I'm a countertenor, but if the lower harmony needs to be padded out, then I'm a sort of bass baritone, but not one that is useful for anything that's necessarily heard. So I will often go down there and fill in notes. There's time, for example, in our arrangement of Homeward Bound, where I actually go and become the bass of the group, and Johnny goes up with the other 3 tenors and basses to sing the tune in unison, things like that. And often I'm going down there and making octaves and fifths with Johnny and Chris. So yes, that does happen. It causes a bit of a problem when we come to publish the arrangement, because you can't really write that in the alto part. So that often needs to be slightly reconsidered for publication purposes. And then last one then, Valeria says, "We've trouble actively listening to each other in our choir. We kind of sing in tune, but we always seem to sing separately. What do you think we ought to do? Any exercises?" Well, Valeria, I would suggest exactly what I was talking about earlier, which is trying to get rid of all of the music so that you don't have to think about what you're seeing and singing. Instead, you're working from memory or even improvising, which allows your ears to be a lot more active. And again, we do a lot of that in the group. We do exercises where we specifically say, okay, we're going to listen to this person and follow them, and we're going to listen for how they turn the diphthong or how they place the consonant. So we begin to tell ourselves to actively listen. And then, of course, when we stop the exercise, we try and maintain that level of listening, but it's not always that easy. Now we're coming to the end, or towards the end of today's show, so I want to let you know a little bit about what's going to be going on this week as part of the Live from Home campaign. So I can stick the schedule up here. You'll be able to see that Paul and Claire are back tomorrow with their creative music making, so get your saucepans ready for that one. Blake and I are going to be talking to the Australian a cappella arranger from the group The Idea of North. Her name is Naomi Krellin. That's happening on Thursday, and Naomi's written many arrangements for us, including Homeward Bound, the one I just spoke about. And we'll be talking to her about all things a cappella. On Friday, I'm back with another album launch party, but this time it's for Apollo 5's new disc, which I previewed last week, that wonderful track, Veni Domini, that so many of you enjoyed. I'll be interviewing all the singers and also playing some of their new music. On Saturday, we've got a new interactive sing-along with VOCES8. The Hallelujah Chorus and Bobby McFerrin's Song 7 Silele were both really popular these last couple of weeks, so watch out for that coming out on Saturday. And on Sunday, Paul will be leading his Singing Brussels session. Singing Brussels is a community singing project we lead annually in partnership with the Beaux-Arts Concert Hall in Brussels. Of course, this year it hasn't been possible for us to go there in person, so instead we're leading it online, and absolutely anybody is welcome. You can find all the details for those events on our socials. And that brings me to the end of the show. So thank you for your engagement and questions, as always, exceptionally insightful, and I hope the answers have been useful. As ever, we are here to learn and develop our skills, as I said at the beginning. We want to really develop delivering these online presentations in a bid to prepare for a post-COVID world. So if you have any comments or suggestions, then please do write to me or put them in the comments here. Thanks to all those of you who've already given your feedback. It's actually really, really useful. Someone told me last week that my camera shakes quite a lot, and it does. If I tap my desk like this, you can see that the camera shakes, and I get a little bit excited. So I hope I've managed to make a small improvement on that this week, and I'm actually trying to get a little bit of a rig set up so I'm not so reliant on not having to touch my desk. Now, what better way for us to leave you than with some singing? So I'll see you live again on Friday for that Apollo 5 launch party. And here is some VOCES8 doing Thomas Luis de Victoria's Regina Coeli in 8 parts. Thank you.